Welcome to episode 36 of the Luke Macias Show. I'm joined here by my conservative friend and strong voice here in San Antonio, Greg Brockhouse. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Super happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for bringing me up this way so we could talk about all things San Antonio, Texas, Austin.
Absolutely. So I know your backstory, and a lot of people who might be listening to this know that you recently ran for mayor here in San Antonio and did, I think, far better than most people ever thought or expected. So why don't you, though, take some time just to give people kind of a background of what got you involved in politics from the first place and, kind of what most recently you were working on.
Sure. Look, I grew up in San Antonio. This is my town, my city. I went to high school here at John Jay, ended up joining the United States Air Force after I got out of high school. Did about 10 years and came right back to San Antonio.
Yep.
And I've lived my entire life right around the SeaWorld area, from Lackland Air Force Base up to about SeaWorld. And I've done different stuff in my life, banking and some small business startups and stuff. But my life has kind of always revolved also around politics, whether I was running for something at student council in the 5th grade or whatever it was. I've always kind of had this little bit of a politics bug to me, a government type bug. And I've worked off and on in different things throughout the years. And as you know, when opportunities present themselves, I said to you never know when it's going to happen, really, which is kind of the funny part, which is almost it's almost destined at some point when things happen. And I had lost during the big mortgage crisis in 2008, 2009. The mortgage banking business went totally bankrupt, right? We just fell out. And that presented me with a golden opportunity. I said I could continue or transfer into some other sort of career, or do something different, or I can get into politics and start spending more time in trying to make my community a little bit better in San Antonio. That community is that, like I said, that SeaWorld area is where I spent my entire life practically. So I said, let's go for it. And I started volunteering on campaigns and just trying to get myself into anything, right? Any little opportunity I could to learn. It didn't matter where it was. City council, working with a state rep, running on a political campaign, giving advice to somebody. I mean, working on a website. It didn't matter what it was. I wanted to learn first to find out, do I like this type of work? And so I did that while still doing some banking, while starting up a couple of companies. And it kind of grew over time until I realized, I was getting sick of getting other people elected. So I said, it's time to see if I can get myself elected, because I knew I loved the work. It's just a matter of, it's a difference between, look, I love this work, and completely different from getting into it and being an elected official and doing the job in that facet. So ran in 13, kind of a setup run against an incumbent council person with 4 years in. We came out with almost 40% of the vote. I don't even think I spent $10,000, right? And I recognized at that point that I knew it was kind of putting me in a position to say, okay, hey, look, this guy's interested in this. I got my name out there. I grew my profile in the community. And then I came back 4 years later and we decided to give it one more shot on an open seat. And, we ran away with it. And we worked our tails off and we earned the 6th council district seat there in San Antonio in 2017. And I served for 2 years. My term ended in June of 2019 because I vacated in what many would have considered a super long shot race. To try to unseat Mayor Ron Nirenberg, who was one of the leaders of this massive progressive leftward tilt in San Antonio politics, which has been going on for a long time.
And before we get to the mayoral run, I want to kind of go back to your time on council. So you get elected to council, and truthfully, there's not really another strong vocal opponent to the mayor's progressive agenda. I don't mean to say that everybody voted with him every time, but there really wasn't anybody who was making a vocal alternative policy position. No. Clayton Perry represents the 10th district. A good solid vote, obviously, good conservative. And we partnered on a lot of things, everything from tax relief to issues with Chick-fil-A to immigration issues. You name it right down the line, we partnered on quite a bit. But look, I led a charge because I said to myself, you get that job. And I think anybody who runs for office, if you're going to do the job, you might as well get in there and be exactly who you are. Any candidate I've ever worked with or advised, I told them that. I said, look, hit the ground running day one, because you have been given a gift and you don't know when it's going to end. Like it could, 2 years could be it. So I went in it full blast. And, I think I cut my teeth and made a name for myself as somebody who was willing to stand up for it. And one of the things I learned that was very important that I never really recognized was all the work that the Democrats, right, the liberals, the progressives were doing in these smaller races, these tiny districts, these municipalities
that they were seeding these policy ideas in the lowest possible level. So when I got elected, one of the things that opened my eyes was these policies and programs that are happening in these tiny little committees, these subcommittee meetings we were having. And at that point, I said, man, I got to say something about everything. Because if I don't, then we're going to get things like tobacco regulation, gun buybacks, Second Amendment challenges, immigration issues. It's a climate change.
Yes.
I mean, you name it, they're bubbling up because the Democrats, and I think my liberal friends in the world, have found a way to put their policies and ideas at the lowest, tiniest, plant a seed.
Yes.
And I said, man, I got to go after every one of them. So I spent 2 years really being, I think, an educated opposition. It wasn't just somebody running around railing saying that Democrats are insane and your progressive policies are wacko. And I came at it from a standpoint of facts and really well-reasoned arguments. And I think I was successful with it. And it resonated.
So I know personally a couple even local officials, city councilmen and stuff like that from around the state that listened to our podcast and provided us feedback before. For somebody who shows up to local office, and let's say in your situation, you show up in an environment where you're not going to be able to very quickly get a majority of votes on council for a policy that you want to advance, right? That's not an easy approach, because if you show up and you go, okay, I think I can get this kind of coalition to pass this type of policy that I want to advance, that's one thing. When you show up in an environment where you are the opposition, what are some just different pieces of advice you have for somebody, and even activists, right? So let's say you're an activist who's involved in the city and you might see 1 or 2 people that agree with you. What is an approach to take? How do you think people should almost organize their opposition? Does that make sense?
You really classified 2 important pieces that I think people listening would need to be very aware of. One is the elected official side of somebody who's outnumbered or in a minority or a loyal opposition position. And then there's the community activist side of it, right? And I've been blessed to do both.
Yep.
I led a charge in 2014 to stop a $450 million streetcar project. We collected signatures. We passed a ballot amendment for to change the charter of the city of San Antonio to prevent this in the future. I mean, we've done a lot from the activist side as well. So, but from the elected official side, the first thing I tell or advise anybody is don't ever think for a minute just because you're outvoted doesn't mean your thoughts aren't worthy, your policy ideas are bad. Because what I found interesting is that in the city of San Antonio, it's like this everywhere.
Yep.
People are elected by such a small, tiny portion of voters that what happens is these elected officials get stuck up in a bubble. And they think they represent the entire community. So point one, come to this knowing that you don't represent, even me as an elected official. My policies and what I believed, I was only elected by 11%. So I don't even know if I represent everybody. So I came at the fight with saying, hey, look, I'm going to live in the district. I'm going to be at every neighborhood meeting. I'm going to have the pulse of who I represent. So I know when I go down there, I'm going to carry their message. 2 types of politicians in the world. One is the one that thinks I get elected to make the decisions for you. The second one is I carry the message. And you only can carry the message if you are living in the community. So point one is get out there and really understand, right, what your people want, the people you represent, and then wrap your life experiences around it because they do elect you to figure that out. And then I went down there and said, it's time to say something about everything. Because if you don't, things will slip by that may seem like nothing at one moment in time, but they're building on a greater policy approach, whether it's a transportation change, a climate change, like something as simple as we want to watch the tobacco age ended up being a building block for a climate action plan because they were worried about the air quality and ozone. I mean, you never know what one point's going to lead to another. So the thing to also remember, point 2, is just because you don't win a vote doesn't mean you didn't win the argument. There's ultimately the biggest scoreboard we have as elected officials is a public vote. 50 plus 1, you win and you're out, right? But that doesn't mean you didn't change the dialogue. So people will say, hey, Brockhouse, you never won a vote, which is not true. I did win a few votes. But the ones that I lost, I actually shifted the conversation. So I prevented a policy from being absolutely horrible. Maybe it was tolerable, right? Because I shined the light on it with my voice. And in doing that, people recognize, and I recognize, hold on a second here, we don't represent this community. We represent the 11% that voted us in, but the other 89%, that's untapped market and resource of knowledge. And I think that bubble really affects new elected officials. Is that they think they probably have a little bit more power than they really do. So I found success in simply pushing back and lessening the regulatory environment of the city of San Antonio. But trust me, that place is still a progressive liberal bastion. Like that place is so far off the rails. But we beat some things back, and they weren't as bad because we shined a light on it with our voice. And like I said, we came prepared to the fight. 2.3, I tell anybody, come prepared. Read the documentation, know what's happening, show up to those meetings, and be ready to go because they are. The other side is.
It's your point in where the discussion goes. One of my favorite quotes, especially in just politics and narratives, is the most important battle is what the battle's about. Right. And that's the first one you get to have. And your point being that if you get to shape the debate and you get to decide even what position they're taking versus what you're taking, you're driving that distinction. Right. And they might even have enough votes on council to win that particular issue from you. But it doesn't mean that you didn't get to decide what this battle was about and what the terms of both the winner and the victor were.
It was pretty much just me. And Clayton Perry was with me, but I was the vocal opposition. Which during the mayoral election we found out San Antonio is a split city, right?
Absolutely.
So it wasn't.
And I want to get to that.
It wasn't right. So I was on the
point.
I was on the right track.
Yes.
But we would come into it. So for instance, I fought for property tax relief, and my first term, my first budget vote, I just said, screw this, and I came on budget day. I motioned with Clayton and we went for it to try to lower the rate. Why? Because at the end of the day, put your name on the vote. I mean, there's nothing more important than standing on your vote. So I motioned and we made him vote down property tax relief. It's not a gimmick.
Yes.
It's a stand. It's a line in the sand. Second budget year came around. We did the exact same thing. We motioned again to lower it, and we included a homestead exemption because the city of San Antonio doesn't have one. We lost. We did. We lost both years. But guess what just passed in the 2020 budget? A citywide homestead exemption. So while in the moment it was getting beat down, we planted a seed of people want property tax relief. It's the biggest issue people complained about. Again, city council, right? 11 percenters elected me. They're inoculated from what people really feel about their city. So I knew that property tax was at the top, public safety's at the top. So we went after it. We lost a couple of times. And then, of course, I'm off the council. They voted it in. Right? So the legacy was there because we brought the fight. So don't, anybody who's thinking about running or gets on there, does the job, don't ever think your voice ain't being heard. The reason it's not being heard is because you're not saying anything. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the only reason why. Because if you say it and it's educated, smart, at least you put some thought behind it, and it's got some passion, it's going to resonate. And that property tax is a perfect example. And they begrudgingly voted it in. I know they did, but that's what the community wanted. So
it's you see a lot of that happening even with the gun control debate. The Democrats are coming out, and Beto O'Rourke and these other guys said, "I want to take your AR-15s and I want to do all this stuff." But to their credit, we have Republicans in Texas who now are putting forth their own gun control measures that are not gun confiscation, but are gun control measures that maybe Barack Obama was recommending in 2009. And that's a perfect example of where Democrats get to decide, hey, we need gun control. And now the discussion is which gun control measures should we or
they
should we pass,
They drove the conversation.
Right?
I mean, Dan Patrick came out saying we got to figure out different type of background check issues now. And and I don't know what the lieutenant governor's play is, right? I got to think there's a longer play here. There's a strategy in place, right? But the Democratic Party pushed that debate. So now we're in their sandbox.
That's right.
And we're dealing on their issues. So while it may appear as though we're driving the debate, in reality, that playing field was already set.
That's right.
Now, there are some things I think, and this is what I'm hopeful for, that the lieutenant governor and other people in the state are thinking about. Look, there are some things that everybody agrees on. So we got easy wins. We've got easy wins. But I always come back at it and I look at it and say, is there something on the books we already should be enforcing? Like, what are we missing? Because I can tell you right now, in San Antonio, there are things we have on the books and ordinances and regulations that we don't enforce, that we ignore. You name it, from immigration to zoning. It doesn't matter what it is. There are things we are not doing that something pops up and then we try to re-regulate, right? Or try to add additional regulation onto something when I'm like, why don't we just enforce the laws we already have on the book? And that was one of my number one lines. Like, why are we reinventing this? Or let's be smart about what we're doing. And what's our impact point here? And what I see with the gun debate is huge. I mean, San Antonio tried to pass. We looked at this a while back when they tried to change the zoning laws in San Antonio. We pushed back on it immediately because a lot of these things, you have to end it in its infancy, right? Like when it's a tiny idea.
Yes.
That's when you debate it and fight it. Because once it bubbles up and it becomes the playing field, okay, now we are done on the gun debate. We are in the gun debate.
Yes.
So now our options are pretty minimal at this point, which is, okay, how do we take the enhanced background checks, right? We all agree now that the corner of it is we don't want mentally ill people, right, to have access to weapons. Now we're living in that. So now we're going to have to find a way to regulate around that. Yeah, the polling indicates 93% of the public or whatever agrees with it. But the problem is those laws and rules are already on the books. The background checks are there. These constitutional amendments and these rights that we've had since the beginning of time. I mean, Democrats are even talking about, constitutional conventions. They're talking about packing the court. I mean, these people are not, they're not sitting here saying, I got tiny goals. No. They're long range. And
it was ironic. I don't know how much of the Democrat debate you watched.
I watched it all, unfortunately. But that's who I am, right?
So this is going to come out in a couple weeks. It will be, weeks after the debate. But I loved when Joe Biden is sitting there going, Kamala, we can't pass an executive order that enacts those gun laws. It's their constitution, And he's going, I'm not saying I don't want to do it. I just can't write an executive order just like Trump can't. And she's going, just say, yes, we can. And you're going, they know what they want to accomplish.
When you're watching
and they don't even care. Joe Biden can say, constitutional scholars say this is not okay, and they could care less.
And I'm not a Biden fan, don't get me wrong, but I'm sitting up there like, man, he is speaking rational. He was rational in his thought process. And they're irrational in it. So the other thing I learned in local politics that has seeped into the tiniest levels, right? Whether you're running for city council in Seguin or you're doing it in Dallas, Houston, or San Antonio, is that they are true believers. There is no middle ground. There is no compromise any longer in those politics. So when I dealt with my colleagues, and here's the thing I think that gets people, the Democrat is not willing to compromise. They're not. You either believe it or you are the exact opposite, meaning you are either a racist, you're anti-LGBTQ, you're anti-whatever, right? There's no in-between. You are either with the Democratic Party on certain issues now, or you're absolutely a pariah. Republicans don't think like that. Not in San Antonio, right? They're willing to look at it and make that move from a leadership perspective that's going to compromise. And I think over time in Texas, that has got Republicans in a lot of trouble. And now I'm not saying we go to the far right extreme and we're absolutely guns blazing everywhere we go. But in this particular point, the Democrats have mastered the art of drawing the lines on the ball field. And now all we're doing is going in between it. And what has done is chipped away at basic rights we've all had as Texans for decades. And now we're looking at it with a state house we're on the brink of losing. We're going to, they're targeting 12 congressional seats in San Antonio and across the state, right? They're going to pick up the 23rd possibly, unless we get behind folks like Tony Gonzalez, different people running in that seat. They're going to pick up, we got Chip Roy's getting challenged by the illustrious Wendy Davis. So they have a coordinated plan. And again, it's a small ball game we're playing, right? We're living in thinking we've got room to, no, we don't. Because you are either with them or you're not, and they will go after you personally too. I don't see Republicans don't go there. So it's one of the most difficult time periods. I think, 2020 is going to be the greatest political year this country has ever seen. But what that outcome is going to be, I think it's going to affect, we roll into 2021 as municipal elections again in San Antonio. So this is going to shape us for the next 10 or 15 years.
One of the things I appreciate about the approach that you took both during your time in San Antonio and seeing these different combating worldviews is that there's a lot of people, Republicans have their own identity crisis and they're trying to figure out exactly what to do about Beto coming within a couple points of Ted Cruz and now being worried about the momentum that Democrats seem to be getting and the energy that they clearly have that we both recognize.
Clearly do.
They do have the energy.
Clearly.
And so going to your point is there's a group within the Republican Party, and this is all across the state, I'm not naming names, that want to basically say, okay, Democrats are getting people on these issues. So now let's figure out where we can align with people in those same issues and try to win some of those people back. And going to your point, kind of saying, Democrats, you set the sandbox and we'll go play in your sandbox and try to figure out how to win here. And there are some who say, I actually believe in my vision for Texas or for the nation or for a local municipality, and I'm going to pitch people the alternative. This is the sandbox they want to set. This is the sandbox I want you to be able to play in.
Don't ever play.
And actually giving the alternative compared to less of what they're saying, but it really goes into a mentality and I think this hits on what you've touched on, even in your time in San Antonio. If you only have 1 or 2 votes on council, the lie that you might believe is that means that only 20% of the people are with you, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of politicians that do that. They look around and they go, well, only a couple people are voting with me. That means only 8% of Texans are with me. And you go, no. You have to understand and have your finger on the pulse of who the people are and what they believe. Because guess what? If you will go give them the alternative, they'll rally around it. And I think that's kind of our segue into your mayoral race. Because I think that shows that is the truth, right? So you decide to run for mayor. And what was the general reaction that people kind of gave you when you first jumped in?
Man, you're going to get killed. No chance in the world.
Yep.
No Republican's going to win.
Yep.
And even though we're nonpartisan, right? And there are issues that align closely for me from time to time that I may have a Democratic, not progressive, but there are some, I'm not going to go that far anymore.
Yes.
But because that progressive wing is so far gone, I couldn't even begin to describe that. But there are things that I align that will go right down the middle as well. Yep. So I thought, man, I've got some credentials here that will win Democratic votes, right? But as soon as I hopped in it, they're like, no conservative's ever going to amount to anything in San Antonio. You're crazy. You've got 1 term under your belt. Not even that. I mean, I think I had 18 months. Impossible situation. You're not going to raise the money. Now, I was blessed with some good outside support. I stood strong on public safety, so the public safety unions are with me, which is a whole other conversation about how the Democrats and their what they used to stand for is not any longer what they believe, right? Public safety unions and that stuff, they're long gone. But I had, good firefighter, police support. Yes. I had support from a lot of folks in the business community as well that were kind of sick and tired of San Antonio's general direction. I said, you know what, it's we got to go now. Because I was really worried that if it went any further without a viable alternative, right, a viable idea. To your point earlier, I don't like to play in someone else's sandbox. I don't play on somebody else's field. Yep. I will have to from time to time because they've cornered me and laid the groundwork. But everything I did, I always did it with the mindset of you're going to react to me. Yes. If you're reacting to them, it's over. I mean, at that point, you've conceded at some point. And we're seeing that, right? And the lieutenant governor, and it's a perfect issue, the gun issue, right? I got to think there's a plan there, and I'm waiting to see, and hopefully it's going to make sense to all of us, because even in San Antonio, it matters now. It was an issue during the campaign, the mayoral campaign. So those are perfect examples. But when I look at them, I say, I don't care what it is. I just need to put myself in the right position, that I'm putting the information out, and I'm putting out alternative. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, I got to be all right with a loss. Mm-hmm. I'm going to hate it like there's no tomorrow. But I felt in my gut, having been out there enough, that there's an undercurrent. And here's the truth about the voting public. Unfortunately, I know I came up 1 point short, right? Yep. I mean, 1,350 people go the other way. Yes. It's my race. Yep. But I knew that at some point, the voters, have to be turned off just enough, right? To where they've finally flipped the switch and moved. San Antonio's just not there yet. But what I did uncover, and I figured out during the campaign as we began to rise and we started putting out the alternative, was that people just needed a choice. And when given a choice and a set of ideas, right, they will, I believe, oftentimes pick what's most important to them. And we know what that is: their home, their house, their street, right, their water bill, their electric bill. And I knew if I capitalize on those ideas and back to the basics of what government was, and here's where the alley is, here's where the win was for me, almost there, was that I knew that they're billions of dollars of spending. They're transforming, socially re-engineering the city. Mm-hmm. So I said, I think the argument is role of government, right? That's about as basic as you can get in any election. These are what we need to do and do well. Public safety, because we vilify police officers like there's no tomorrow. The laws aren't followed, whether it's immigration, border security, you name it, right? We're bypassing laws. We take better care of people who aren't citizens than we do our own citizens, right? We have homeless veterans. our crime rate's out of control. I mean, I knew that those things were issues that people were worried about. Can't get my yard mowed from the city median or right away. I mean, I knew it. So I said, you know what? That's the alternative. And as I got back to the basics of who you are as an elected official, as a government, that people recognize that. And it began to grow and build, and over time, and then look, they came at me with everything they had too. Again, back to what I said about Democrats versus Republicans. Democrats will come after you and vilify you to the ends of the earth. They will attack your family. They will tear apart your children. They will go after your character. It makes no difference to them, right? Just because you may say, hey, look, I believe in traditional marriage. Well, watch out, because now they're going to destroy the... They went after Drew Brees the other day. I mean, Drew Brees is beloved in New Orleans, right? You're going to get utterly destroyed, right? And a Republican's going to sit over there, a conservative person, try to match idea for idea, and it just doesn't, it's a different playing field. So I went after it, got into it. Look, the basics worked. People responded to the one-on-one care and concern. Customer service mattered. I mean, these are all basic building blocks of organizations, businesses, political campaigns, government. And yeah, I had to weather a hellacious attack that people would be like, why would I ever want to do this? Like, why would anybody ever run? But once I got into it, I recognized quickly that people appreciate choice. And they appreciate the opportunity to say, okay, look, I can see there's two differing views here for what the city is, for what we believe government should be. And it applies this way in every city. I don't care what size of it. It could be Von Ormy or it could be Houston. They're all looking for a viable opportunity to make a choice between two ideas. I was blessed with a stark difference, right? So I had the clear choice. And then government also, the leadership also gives you some gifts from time to time. The political gods come down and say, hey, look, we're going to put a few defining issues. We had Chick-fil-A. I got my Chick-fil-A drink right here. It came out, but people just weren't quite there. So it ended up 51-49, right? But it was a tough defeat. It was but proud. I mean, I walked away from that. About everybody's uncle texted me afterwards. Even Nuremberg, my opponent's supporters are like, dude, I never thought. The number one thing I get is you uncovered something that nobody knew was there. People sensed there was this restless unhappiness with the progressive agenda, right? People were concerned about it. And the more people learned about it, here's the learning point. The more people learn about what the progressive agenda really is, the more they understand how much it costs, the more they understand the uncertainty, the more they learn about the social change of the family, of the lifestyle, of your car, of all of it. The more they see that, the more they're like, hold on. So I was able to pull a strong contingent of conservative support. Obviously, I won it and won it huge. And then I was able to pull in a nice sizable portion of Democrats as well, right? Granted, I needed 1% more of them, but it's a lesson to be learned that I think if you bring the fight in what matters most, and you shine the light back on. We talked earlier about the activists. I was successful in activism because I quantified people's real opposition, right, to council members. Council members freak out, or elected officials freak out if they get 50 phone calls on an issue. It's catastrophic. Like a state rep right now, if you pummeled 100 phone calls into a state rep's office, they freak out. Like, what is this? Is this this is a tsunami of opposition? I got to learn what's happening here. This is bad. And the city council member, you put 50 phone calls into their office or 50 signatures or a tiny petition, they're going to freak out. And I think the people are right for it, man. And I don't think the biggest lesson is I don't think Texas is as lost as it is, especially our big cities. But we're 1 or 2 elections away from it being forever gone, right? Like I was 9-2 on that council. And I still had 49% of the vote. So what that looks like is even after weathering their horrific onslaught, I was at a 49. So keep that in mind. And I think if we apply those principles and if the Republican Party to me across the state, and look, I'm a student of politics. I love watching it, and I watch Austin. I watch it all. We got to get out of playing on the other side's ball field, period.
And to your point, you didn't go out and say, hey, Ron Nuremberg has this progressive vision for the city, and I have a less progressive vision, right? You didn't say, he wants to go this far. I just want to take a couple steps in the same direction he wants to go. You said, no. He wants to take you in the wrong direction, and I want to take you in this direction. And this is what I see as the future of our city.
100%. And I didn't sit there and say, well, look, I'm going to, and a lot of times a political consultant or an elected official, somebody running for office will say, well, I have to co-op. I have to take some of their talking points.
Yeah.
They're almost in the right mindset, in my opinion. It's not that I need to co-op their talking points, because back to the gun debate one, right? We're looking at that and we're probably saying, well, look, we know background checks have 93%. We know the Democrats are after background checks. We can steal that point from them, right? And that, I mean, there's some logic to that.
Yep.
I'll take their point and end their conversation. But what you've done is you've given them an inch, right? Into a core value item.
Yes.
You can maybe do that when it comes to mowing schedules for state highways or something,
Yep.
right? Like you can, I'll co-op you. I'll give on some of it.
Yes.
But some of these core value items,
Yep.
you can't just, I'm going to move just a little bit and take their message. Because the truth is, when you try to co-op, you're taking something that's inherently not yours, right? So you become a champion for something that you never believed in the first place. So what I did in my race, I said, look, stick to my hardcore facts and points. And no matter where he went, I stayed on mine.
Yep.
And if anybody watched that campaign, he lived in my...
That's right.
It was never the other way around.
Yep.
And when we... Look, heads up on this. We polled him initially. He's at 51 to 55% approval rating, right? And his name ID is 70-some, low 70s. I mean, people knew who he was in Mayor of San Antonio. I was at a 19. And I had 4 months. And you know what? We grew. And we grew because we understood... It's all on our idea. I mean, there was a string of times there where I was throwing out these action plan items, and every week they're reacting, and that's when you know you're in the game.
Yes.
And even when he did something or came after me with something absolutely horrible, right? Their attacks were personal. All mine were ideas. Even then, I stayed on the path, right? So again, we're talking about people running for office or getting engaged. Or how do you take the next big step? Number one, I probably wouldn't advise anybody to run after half a term as a first termer. I mean, but I think San Antonio was in a world of hurt.
Yes.
And I think the argument needed to be made, right? And so I would advise you also when we're looking at people saying, how are we going to affect that piece, right? Like, how am I going to beat back any of that? It's just go to what and who you inherently are and put those ideas on the table. And I think when I did that, and I didn't ever compromise it. I never once did it. And people get a little bit upset with me because they'll say, well, why'd you go to the Stonewall Democrats meeting?
Yes.
To get an endorsement. I said, why wouldn't I? I mean, I'm going to go walk in there and tell them exactly what I think.
Yep.
I'm going to tell them exactly what I believe. And I did. And I showed up, and begrudgingly they accepted me, and we walked and we talked and walked out there. I said, have a great day. Yep. I didn't get the endorsement. Like they basically had the cards printed for my opponent. But I think we got to get into that kind of mentality, and nobody gets cast aside. I mean, I'll go into the toughest room, and that's the other point, right? Like during that campaign, I went into the most ardent oppositional room to me that could possibly exist. I mean, and because their perceptions are all wrong. That's the other piece, right? Like the Stonewall Democrats, the same thing. They thought I was one, and these people's mindset, or the voter mindset, is so narrow because of a lack of information that the minute you sprinkle some ideas and information on them, they respond.
Yep.
Maybe not always to what you want, but
you mentioned the realities of, conservative ideas are not as dead in the urban areas as some people think, but we also have just a couple cycles to actually deal with that issue, or they're just going to be kind of forever lost in your words. If I know you know San Antonio specifically, but I want you for a second to kind of think of what might be able to be exported into Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, some of these other, city centers, Austin. I guess we can kind of put them somewhere else. But those urban centers, like, what are a couple universal either issue sets, messages, or things that we should be looking at as conservatives to message in these urban centers? Like, what is the plan? What's the game plan? What do you take away from the Greg Brockhouse for mayor campaign that can be exported into some of those urban centers?
Well, crime and public safety is always at the top of that list. So you would be surprised. It's job one of any elected official. I don't care if you're the president of the United States, the governor of Texas, or Greg Brockhouse in District 6, San Antonio. Public safety matters. It's always job one. And it's a good it's a good dichotomy. It's a good point. It's a good reference point because the Democrats live in vilifying public safety professionals. Like it's their life is going after cops.
Yep.
And screaming racism and all these other things, right? When in reality, we know that 99% of police officers who walk this street are fantastic men and women and do the job. So there's always a huge piece. And the big municipalities that are run by Democrats often have a particular characteristic set to them. They have crime issues.
Yep.
They always have issues with crime.
Yep.
You can look across the nation. When you look at the biggest run municipalities in the nation, they're run by Democrats and they often have very basic problems. You can't afford to live there, gentrification, and crime.
Yep.
It's almost universal, right? So it's because of their overreach. I'll get to that in a second. But I think public safety matters, and it's a safe spot to be in. Plus, you also bring in support from police officers and firefighters.
Yep.
And Democrats don't want those unions anymore. And so the Republican shies away from the union, but I think the Republicans have they have a different mindset when it comes to police officers and firefighters. So don't forget that. I think you can embrace that. And they oftentimes have financing and manpower to help out campaigns. So I think police officer and firefighter and public safety support is always huge. It always wins. It's something as basic as response times, right? Like, what's the real response time? How long have you been on that phone call till I show up? Boy, someone's gonna respond to that. And then I think there's this affordability factor that I see as the next. It is the next issue. Well, the Democrats and the progressives in San Antonio are already on it, but it's the affordability factor, right? So here's the affordability factor conversation I think plays well in Dallas, Austin, Houston, and is going to continue to play in San Antonio. The progressive liberal response to affordability is to put more cash into it, is to pay it for you, right? Like I've got more incentives to help you. You can't afford to fix a roof on your house. Let me give you $25,000 so you can go. San Antonio's doing that. They just passed $1.5 million. $5 million to fix people's roofs.
Really?
Yeah, in the budget cycle, right? Or like take the homeless thing in Austin, right? Well, these people need to be treated with compassion. I agree with that. So let's decriminalize trespassing, right? Because we're helping them, right? And what it's doing is it's destroying fabric, right? It's destroying affordability businesses. So the affordability conversation for a conservative-minded candidate is huge. So when you get into the fight on affordability, what you're talking about is property tax relief, fewer fees. I know my dollars are going to things that matter most. And if you live in that realm, the progressive liberal, guess what they're doing? They're trying to find ways to raise taxes and take more money. They're the root cause of gentrification, by the way, right? You know what? You want to know why San Antonio is slowly becoming Austin? Actually, we're accelerating to become Austin. Is because we took the principles of downtown development and pumping hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into incentives for affordable units that aren't affordable for the people they're allegedly targeting. It's insane. So we're destroying neighborhoods. So, I had as a conservative-minded candidate, I had great success when I went into neighborhoods in urban areas and said, look, your grandma can't live in that house next year because they're building this $10 million development right here because they want to have apartments there that cost $2,500 a month for a family of 3 or 4. They're not going to afford it. So property tax relief always resonates. So public safety resonates. And then fees, utility costs, it all resonates. So the biggest thing outside of public safety I encountered was affordability. And that, more than ever, is a huge contrast between the Democrat and the Republican, the conservative, the progressive. That conversation about, look, you're spending, you're out of control. You have daddy's keys to his car and you're driving 95 miles an hour up and down I-35. It is on. You aren't even stopping. In fact, you're going the wrong way on the highway. You're the wrong way driver. And when I came on there, I said, hey, look, let's get back to the basics and let's live in that, right? And that sells in Houston, Austin. It's going to sell in Austin now more. Guess what the conversation Austin's having all day long? I can't live here. I mean, we've squeezed out long-standing minority districts, right? The minority representation is suffering. San Antonio's down to 1 seat, really, from an African-American representation perspective. If they lose that, we may never have that on the council again. Those things matter, right? And people think that. And it's okay for a conservative Republican to say, well, let's talk about the demographics and who's representing us. It's maybe not a fun conversation to have, but it does matter, right? Because that gentrification piece is a huge opportunity for us as fiscal responsible people, right? Tax cutters, right? fee reducers, more money to you, right? That is the winning, ultimately is going to become the winning argument, because here's the truth. Eventually, they're going to push, and I think they're already there. The liberal progressive is on the edge of the tipping point because they think they're going to turn Texas blue. They're on the brink. I'm not saying they're not. But they're going to overreach. And the minute you overreach, if you're the opposition sitting there, you have to be mindful, on point about what matters most, and there with a thorough plan to make sure that you can count. And it's a great counterbalance. Like I want that argument in a campaign every day. If I'm managing a candidate, I want the argument versus big time spender, $1 billion programs and property tax relief guy who wants to make sure grandma can stay in her house. And for far too long, that conversation was, well, I just want to cut property taxes and no. The conversation became more, let's make sure that grandma can keep her home, right? Because the people that are getting priced out are the seniors, are the people living on the edges in the $85,000 home that the property flipper wants to turn it into a $450,000 house in the next 3 years. And that's where you win. And I think if you get it out of and this I will criticize the conservative mindset on, is we live in the policy idea. And it's the policy idea is property tax relief and blah, 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 blah. The reality of it is grandma can't keep her house because you're getting priced out by the ridiculous development that's funded by the city of San Antonio because they want to create 7,500 new downtown households or new downtown apartment units at a cost of, I don't know, $1 billion, right? And look at Austin. Like our neighbor to the north has destroyed their affordability for the average Joe. And it's out of control. Right? Their traffic sucks. Their crime's got issues. That council isn't looking like the rest of the city any longer. I mean, it's brewing with the perfect example of how an back to basics, logical, conservative mentality. Here's the truth too. The neighbors that I would talk to, right? The Hispanic Democrat, right? The faith-based Democrat who sits there and says, these are the things I believe. They're on the sidelines right now. Because they're not quite with the progressive movement, but they're still Democrats, right? So they'll still go pull the trigger for the Democrat. Well, they can't do that any longer, right? They're no longer straight ticket voting, but they're with them, but they're sick and tired of it. They're not ever going to be Republicans.
No.
But what they are going to be is remember that old Reagan Democrat mentality? It's drastically different than obviously it was, but the mentality, this sense being that, look, I like those ideas because I'm a person of faith. I'm a Catholic. I've been a long time Baptist. Whatever my answer is, I see opportunity in that Republican guy or that Republican woman. I see something in there. And you know what? That's gone too far left. And that's where they're at. They're on the brink of too far. So in my mayoral election, I really think, look, I'll be as blunt as possible. I don't think San Antonio residents were screwed over enough. That's it. I mean, I mean, they just weren't quite done. But I think the next election they are, right? I think over the next year, what you're going to see is such a broad overreach across the state because they're arrogant about it. And in their arrogance, they're going to overreach. And those of us that believe the opposite just need to be prepared with the ideas, always pushing them when the opportunity presents itself.
If you are a conservative in San Antonio, conservative-minded person, retired business owner, teacher, stay-at-home mom or dad, whatever, what would you recommend they do? What are a couple things they can do right now, this year, next year, just to further engage in their city?
Point one is where the heck's my neighborhood association meet? That's point one. They're the building block, right?
And right, if you're wanting to have an impact on a municipal level, the HOA is the place to start.
The
HOAs have a lot of influence.
It's the only place. Not only do they have influence with across the state, just from homeowners associations and property management companies and all that, but they have influence in city politics. Every municipality cares about what the homeowners, and guess what? The council person or state representative is going to have somebody there all the time. They always show up. I don't care if there's 5 people that show up to the neighborhood meeting. If that neighborhood meeting is on the schedule, an elected official is going to have someone there do their best to get there themselves. That's a pretty universal practice of an elected official. So homeowner associations matters, and you got to get into those mix. And you got to find out who the heck represents you. You'd be surprised if people have absolutely no clue. And in that, understanding who it is reaching out to them. When I decided I wanted to get involved just as a person, as a, you know what I did? I found out who my elected council person was, and I went over there and tried to engage it. Like, what do you need help on? I got a problem with this. Or I just shoot an email in, but not like an overbearing, because we all know that person, right?
Yes.
Who, it doesn't matter what the issue is, sends in the canned response saying, you stink, Brockhouse. You absolutely horrible. You're the devil. You get those. But I'm talking about finding out really who your elected official is. These things, we always advise people to do this, but nobody ever does it. And when somebody would come visit me, I immediately put them on a board or commission. Like, what do you want to do? Like, it's that, elected officials are that desperate for the help.
Yes.
So you are going to have a level of success. Because, look, you're not going to quit your job and go work in a council office. You're not going to quit your job and go run for a political office or help a political campaign. But you can sit on a board or commission. But even then, you could send an email or make a phone call into the office. Obviously, the pinnacle of that is get out and vote. But we're all suffering with that. But we suffer with that because we hate our elected officials. Let's be honest here. Nobody likes politicians. So we always get pissed off and say, oh man, it's the voters' fault. They're disengaged. They suck. They're terrible. Ah, man, I don't buy that for a minute. It's bad politics is what's putting people on the sidelines, right? So I think if you engage it, you're going to find success. So the beauty of showing up in the electoral fight as a citizen who just wants to get involved, the minute you dip your toe in the water, you're going to get more. So you can go as far into it as you want. Maybe you sit on a board or do something from a zoning perspective. Or usually what happens is people get pissed off when they come and try to build something in their neighborhood, and that's when they get engaged, when it's too late. We had a big debate 5 years ago about non-discrimination ordinances in San Antonio, and people came to visit me and said, how do we fight this? I said, you should have fought this 5 years ago. 4 years ago. You've already lost. I mean, your position of not having a non-discrimination ordinance that's getting voted on in 1 month, you're done. What do you mean? I mean, we can pack the council offices. We can stop this. I'm like, no, you can't. You didn't recognize the seedling that was planted, and then you didn't do anything about it 2 years ago by electing different people. So you've already lost. We're going to have 5,000 people down there, 10,000 people down there. It's not going to change. And they came downtown, and they spoke at Citizens to be Heard till 3 a.m. in the morning, and the council voted unanimously to implement the non-discrimination. Well, no, it was 9-2, something like that. Something like that. 2 people voted against it. But
the point is that the votes, and you could have known that these 2 or 3 people might vote against it. These people are going to vote for it.
Over.
It's the vote's already cast. You're not moving these people.
So then they quit. I'm like, well, the answer wasn't the last minute show up because Walmart's about to build next to your house next week.
And you and I know so many people who engage in politics. It shows up in their backyard. They engage, they don't win, and then they walk away.
They pull the ripcord. They ripcord and out.
And we do a lot of candidates like that too. They have never done anything. They show up. They go, I want to run for office. They run for office.
That's a good point.
They lose, and then you go, okay, I'm gonna go home. They had their chance to get me, and then they might not do anything, and they might show up in 4 years and go, I'm running for office again. And you go, wait a second, what were you doing in between? Why were you not engaged in that process?
You hit the nail on the head. We should have mentioned that earlier about what people got to do to get engaged. Don't show up when it's time to file. What are you doing? Like, where have you been? And when a candidate comes to me and says, hey, man, I'm thinking about running, and I'm like, for what? Well, city council elections in 4 months. I'm thinking about filing for it next week. Well, what have you done? I've never seen you. And then when you are seen, do you then turn around and get into the argument, right? And are you showing up at neighborhood meetings? Are you walking doors? Are you doing something so people know who the heck you are? Right? Like, you just don't pop out of nowhere. So that's a great point, man. And then if you do lose, don't quit.
That's right.
I mean, look, I lost the mayor's race. It stings me every day.
You lost your first council race.
I came back.
And then you ran away with it.
And I ran away with it in a 56% Democratic district.
Yes, absolutely.
I won in a heavily Democratic district. Why? Because the ideas mattered. And I didn't get so ideologue about it that I pissed everybody off. You got to know where you're running, too. You got to know who you're running against.
But you also didn't not do anything and show up 4 years later wanting to be a councilman, right? You said, I'm going to be in this community. I'm going to be involved in this area. I'm going to get to know the HOA presidents. I'm going to understand I'm going to build my roots here so that 4 years, if I still want to do this. And here's the nice thing. You win either way. I mean, meaning more of us need to be doing more of that within cities, and then whether or not you run or somebody else runs, that's going to start building the foundation.
Yeah.
Now, they can also, I will say, if somebody's in San Antonio, they want to know more about what's going on in the city, they want to stay more active, engaged, they can follow your show. Is that also correct?
I have a podcast, so my mayoral defeat.
You need to do a better job. Like that should have been the third point. You should have been like,
that's why
point three is the broadcast.
Point one is before I talk about I have a broadcast. No, I converted to my, a lot of what I did as a candidate, and then as an elected official, I converted it into a podcast. It's called the Brockcast. And one of the fun things we did when I was elected was everything we could attach my name Brockhouse to. Brock, we adopted it, right?
Yep.
Instead of block walking, it was Brock walking.
Yeah, Brock the vote.
Yeah, Brock the vote. It became ridiculous, and it was so much fun, but at the end of the day, it stuck in people's minds, right?
Yes.
So it was a good marketing tool.
Absolutely.
But no, we started a podcast, and we talk about all kinds of issues. And look, what's freaking me out about it is it's resonating with people. Like, and it's pretty cool too, because you get to be a bit unleashed.
Yes.
Like when you're elected, you're like, well, if I say that, I'm going to piss off 18.2% of the city, and I need 19.7, and I got to be very careful over here, and I don't want to piss this person off. And nah, man, I just sit there and talk about, like 2 weeks ago, we had Mike Mahalski, a guy that owns Sons of Liberty Gun Works.
Okay.
We're talking about gun buybacks in the city. We brought him on, and it was a fantastic conversation, man. And he's a Second Amendment guy. Knows everybody from Dan Crenshaw up in Dallas all the way down to our local elected officials in San Antonio. Met him through the mayoral race, and I brought him on because he said, I never cared about local politics ever. I don't even care. Until I saw or they did something to me. And now this guy's active and all in it. And I brought him on the show, and we had that conversation. And I bring candidates on, and just follow us. We do it every Tuesday night at 9 o'clock. We're probably going to move it a little earlier to grow it some more. I think 9 o'clock is probably a little bit late. So we're going to move it a little bit earlier, but we have fun on it too. We start off with fun stories, and we close with fun items, things that are humorous in today's world. But in the middle, we talk about everything from homeless situations, homeless initiatives, gun buybacks, crime, the sheriff's office, you name it, right? Needle exchange program. It doesn't matter what it is, climate action, transportation. We talk about the issues, and we bring people on. We have a good time with it.
So people can find that on Facebook.
It's on Facebook. The Brockcast is the name of it. And then we're streaming live on YouTube and Twitter as well. Same name. But Facebook catches it, and we go for about an hour. An hour and 10 minutes, and we have a good old time with it. So thank you for that.
So I want to end, like kind of taking the politics out of it. Just you and I both care about the city. A lot of my family lives in the city. I might move into San Antonio here in the next year or so, and I've got a lot of connections there, some rental properties there, and you, of course, have deep roots within that city. Where do you see what exciting stuff is happening just within the city? Like I said, take the politics out of it. Just let's talk about San Antonio, the growth that's happening here, kind of the 35 corridor and the development. And
what I love about
positive,
what I love about San Antonio is we're successful. No matter who the ridiculous elected officials are, like it doesn't matter who the mayor is. San Antonio is resilient like that. We just keep going. And we're growing in different ways. So what I like about San Antonio, the basic stuff, the transportation is fantastic. We move through it quickly. We don't have a lot of problems with traffic congestion.
No, compared to the rest of the nation or the state.
Our employment is excellent. It's got nothing to do with what the city council's doing. I had no effect on the employment rate, but look, jobs and opportunity down there are huge. We've got a great biotech sector. We're doing really good with things like Brooks City Base, which is someone took the old Brooks Air Force Base. We've managed in San Antonio to reposition closed down military installations into really massive nodes of like biotech. We've done a lot of work with transportation at Port San Antonio. We've got a rail yard down there. They're actually moving themselves into it. They fix Air Force One down there, for Pete's sakes. Boeing's a huge tenant down there. Aerospace is huge. So we've got these really differing ways. What I love about San Antonio is it's a lot of different communities in the biggest small town you're ever going to encounter. Even in my area where I live at, in the SeaWorld area, they're bringing tens of millions of dollars of development are coming into my area where I used to represent over there. because people are recognizing how you create walkable, livable communities. So we've got a massive $300 million investment coming off of one of a Petranco Road in 410 area. But that's happening all over the city. Downtown's starting to spark up really good as well. We make fun a little bit earlier about the housing situation. That's probably the biggest problem. But the downtown is growing. Had the first Frost Tower opened up down there. First change in the San Antonio skyline in, I think, 50 years. Right?
A very long time.
I think that's fantastic. And look, San Antonio is truly unlike any other city in the state. In so much as that it is still a family-oriented feeling community, rooted in faith, right? Founded on faith. That's what I really love about it. It's a big component of San Antonio. And that's huge as well. And I think also, look, we're redesigning the Alamo. That ticked a lot of people off. I'm sorry if I mentioned that one. But there's a lot of investment going into really creating San Antonio from a cultural heritage perspective. And I think that's huge and good for all of us. There are things we need to get better at, just like every city. And we need to figure out our airport. We've got issues with some climate action plans. I've got some bad politics and things going on. But, we'll always figure those things out. San Antonio rebounds, and that's why I love it. And absolutely fantastic.
And like you said, these things are these are not credited to any politicians. Didn't create the reality that San Antonio is a really big city that feels like a really small town, right? And and we were, it was way back politicians that decided to build the 410 and the 1604 loop and other stuff like that make the transportation and moving to and from all sorts of areas much less difficult than it is. I mean, I was in Dallas on Tuesday and Houston on yesterday.
Yeah, good luck to you.
And goodness gracious, you look at the cities and you go, who designed these major
Nobody was. San Antonio
roads?
Was seventh largest city in the nation, and nobody would have the slightest clue.
No. So
that's a blessing.
And I think it also goes back to what you uncovered, which is the fact that these people are not like some of the other urban centers. And there is a huge opportunity that exists because of that kind of cultural reality of where San Antonio is.
And don't forget, I stress this as we wrap up here, our communities are not as bad as the progressive liberal would have you believe. It's not. And that lack of belief, the need to want to change our cities, right? To socially re-engineer our communities because we're racist, we're out of control, we're all these things, we don't care about people. That's the win for us, because the truth is about Texas and our big cities is that people love them. And people are happy where they're at, and they do love San Antonio, and they don't want to change themselves drastically. They just want to get better at what they're doing now. They don't need to turn ourselves into something we're not. And I think that is what I love about San Antonio. We don't need to be Austin, although our leadership may want to be Austin or Portland. It doesn't resonate. So we're never as bad as that progressive would have you believe. And I hate to close on a hard political point, but that's the truth.
Absolutely.
We are a fantastic community who's got a lot of great things going for it. And we're not some racist community that's lived in a legacy of hate for 100 years. And we've got to fix these things and reparations and all sort of other stuff. That's not San Antonio.
No.
And that's why I love it. And frankly, it's not Texas. It's just, we need to get there and make sure that message gets out there, just how great we are. And that exceptionalism is a good conversation to have.
Absolutely.
And the other side hates it because it doesn't fit in their narrative. So it's a good spot to always land on. Just talk about how good we really are.
Absolutely. Greg, thank you for jumping in the fray, not only back when you began, but also your willingness to jump in on the mayoral race. Thank you for even being a voice that's encouraging conservatives to not go down the path and don't play in the sandbox of what the enemy wants us to say and the arguments they want us to have, but actually defining our own narratives. And I think if that message alone can get to conservative-minded Texans all across the state, we really can build a message that will resonate, because we are the vast majority of Texans. And it's just a matter of whether or not we're going to let them decide what our debate is for the next year, or whether we're going to define it. And you've been a voice that's really pushed us in the right direction. So I'm grateful, and I'm grateful for you coming and joining us today.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.